Thanks and welcome to the event today, which is one of those in a series around the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. This event is organised by the Bloody Sunday Trust and the Pat Finucane Centre. It's actually part one of a two-part event. The second part will be on Friday the 28th at 1 o'clock. Where Susan Mackay will be in conversation with former Lieutenant Colonel, now Reverend Nicholas Mercer, who was the lead British Army legal officer in Iraq. But today we're going to hear from a group of people working on campaigns around people who they lost during the conflict. And we'll turn to those in a second. My name is Brian Dooley. I'm from Human Rights First, which is a Washington-based NGO. And we've been engaged on some of these issues around the Troubles since around the 1980s, most prominently the Pat Finucane murder, but many other associated issues since. Today's session is called Pinochet Plus Amnesty, which is a reference to the British legislation, which we think is likely to be brought in sometime this year, which would essentially put an end to all Troubles-related prosecutions on all sides. The reference to Pinochet is that when you compare previous such amnesties post-conflict, the standard used to be that the worst around really was the Pinochet one. The legal academic at Queen's, Louise Mallender, is an expert on this, and she's looked at 300 such amnesties from around the world. And in her estimation, really, there is nothing quite like what the British are intending to introduce. The formerly worst one, it was believed, was the Pinochet one, which was brought in after 17 years of rule by Pinochet in Chile during his dictatorship. But even that amnesty was time bound in that it really only focused, it really only ran for the first 5 years of those 17 years. And certain crimes were also exempt from being amnestied, including some sexual crimes. In what we believe to be the British version, there is no time limit. It would go for the whole of the length of the Troubles, and there would be no exceptions, no exemptions, whatever crime were committed. So we're going to start with our first speaker, who is John Kelly.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for having me on here. I'm the brother of Michael Kelly, one of those who was murdered on Bloody Sunday, and I was there on the day itself. And this coming Sunday will be the 50th anniversary. As everyone knows, on that day, 13 people were shot dead and 18 others were badly injured. One of those 18 died later from his injuries, and so therefore we declare that there were 14 dead and 17 badly injured. Now, every one of those who were shot that day were shot by the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment. Michael, my brother, who was just 17 years old, was shot by Soldier F. And I think everybody here has heard of Soldier F. And I hate to say him as Soldier F, because in my view, his name should be in the public domain. And Soldier F, we know, murdered Michael due to the fact that the bullet that killed Michael entered his stomach and embedded in his spine. Now, over the many years, we have been campaigning to prove the innocence of our people, because directly after Bloody Sunday, we have what was known as a Widgery inquiry, whereby the Lord Chief Justice of England told lies about our people. And afterwards, we were told that an inquiry set up by the British government, once the result is made public, it cannot be changed. But we felt differently, because we felt that not only was 14 murders, attempted murders on Bloody Sunday, but also the truth of Bloody Sunday was also murdered by the Lord Chief Justice of England. So we have been campaigning for many, many years. And actually in 1992, we set up a campaign called the Bloody Sunday Justice Campaign. And the campaign themselves was made up of the families and supporters. It was a non-political campaign and also with 3 demands. The first one was a full declaration of innocence for our people. The second one was the repudiation of butchery. And the third one was the prosecution of all those who committed the killings and those who planned it. For 6 years, we campaigned from '92, and eventually we got an inquiry set up by the British government, by Tony Blair, in 1998. And it was led by a guy called Lord Saville. And from that second inquiry, after 12.5 years of an inquiry, on the 15th of June 2010, we got a second report that vindicated all our loved ones. All our loved ones have now been declared innocent, dead and injured. David Cameron, on that day in Parliament, accepted the truth of Bloody Sunday and accepted that our people were innocent by saying that it was unjustified, it was unjustifiable, it was wrong. And he actually apologised on behalf of the British government, on behalf of the British people, for the wrongdoing of Bloody Sunday. So therefore, that in itself proves that our people were innocent and accepted by the British government. After that, we had an investigation. It was handed to the PPS, Public Prosecution Services, who in turn handed to the police to do an investigation into what happened. And I must underline the fact that the RUC, the police, never ever investigated Bloody Sunday. And they produced a report that was handed back to the PPS. And we ourselves were brought to the City Hotel in Derry to hear the result of the PPS decision whether to prosecute or not. And that decision that day was to prosecute just one soldier, and that soldier was Soldier F. And he was being prosecuted for the murder of 2 innocent victims, Willie McKinney and Tim Ray, and the attempted murder of 5 others. And to be truthful, we were very, very disappointed in the outcome, because we believed that every soldier should be prosecuted. Every soldier fired a shot that day should be prosecuted for murder and attempted murder. But the way we looked at it, if we get one soldier, we get them all. We're all equal in this. And we look forward to the beginning of the trial, and eventually it began. And after a few months, deliberations and so on, we were told then they were going to drop the charges against Soldier F. At this moment in time, we're in the process of, before the High Court, appealing the decision by the PPS not to prosecute Soldier F or any other soldier, taking into account that there was 18 soldiers involved in the killings and attempted murders on Bloody Sunday. So we've now been before the High Court, and we're waiting for the outcome. But our view on it is quite simple. 14 people were murdered, 17 were attempted murder. And our view on it is quite simple. They must be prosecuted, because justice has to be seen to be done. We must achieve our third demand, and that is the prosecution of the killers. And that is important, not just for the families, but for everyone, every human being. Every human being is entitled to justice for wrongdoing. And we will continue on campaigning to see justice be done. And by the way, what we're trying to achieve is not revenge, but justice for our people, justice for our loved ones. And it goes right across the board here, right across the board. No matter who died, as we said, nearly 3,600 people died during the Troubles and that conflict. Every one of those families that were left behind are entitled to justice. And for the British government to remove that opportunity from the people is nothing but scandalous. And we believe that the reason why they're doing it is simply to protect the security force murderers. Think about it. Nearly 300, they murdered over the conflict. They murdered 360 people, something like that. That means those people are not going to see justice be done, simply because of what the British government is going to try and do. And hopefully, quite soon, we hopefully will be getting a report from the High Court. And as far as we're concerned, the journey continues, and justice hopefully will be seen to be done. And we're going to fight this statute of limitation every step of the way.
Thank you very much, John. We'll come back at the end of the other presentations, perhaps, and have a bit more of a discussion around this. But next up, please, Natasha Butler, could you introduce who you are and what your campaign is around?
Hiya, my name's Natasha Butler. I'm the granddaughter of 38-year-old Paddy Butler. who was murdered in the Springhill West Rock Massacre on the 9th of July 1972. I'm also part of the Springhill West Rock Massacre campaign group. So on the 9th of July 1972, there was an IRA ceasefire between the British Army and the IRA. That ended when the British Army opened up fire indiscriminately, preventing Catholics from moving into these new homes on Glenanne, which was a few miles from Springhill West Rock. Sometime after 9 p.m, everything was relatively quiet. The One King's Regiment opened up fire indiscriminately without any warning onto cars who had pulled up side by side, injuring 19-year-old Martin Dooley, which he survived. Upon the gunfire, 16-year-old John Dougal went to the aid of Martin Dooley. He was shot and killed. Brian Pettigrew tried to help John Dougal, and he was shot as well, but thankfully he survived. Father Noel Fitzpatrick was our local parish priest. He was new to the area. He rapped on my grandfather's door asking would he mind finding a safe passage so he could administer first aid and the last rites to the death and the injured. So my granda helped him try and find a safe passage, and Father Noel Fitzpatrick was waving a white handkerchief to demonstrate he was unarmed and he was non-combative, and the British Army opened up fire, one bullet killing Father Noel Fitzpatrick and my granda. It went through Father Noel Fitzpatrick's neck and hit my granda in the face. 15-year-old David McCaffrey, he tried to pull my granda and Father Noel Fitzpatrick to safety, and he was repeatedly shot and he died. 13-year-old schoolgirl Margaret Gargan, she had just left the community centre. There was a local bingo on and she was chatting, talking to her girlfriends, and she was shot in the back of the head. This happened away from the media. This happened 11 months after Ballymurphy and 6 months after Bloody Sunday, were commonly referred to as the Forgotten Massacre. Before we had buried our loved ones, the British state had buried the truth. In 1999, the families had restarted a campaign to find out the truth of what happened on the 9th of July, because the British Army versions of events is they didn't shoot no priest, they didn't see anybody in priest's clothing, and everybody shot that day was an IRA gunman. So there's never been no police investigation into the death of our loved ones. The original inquest was flawed. The British soldiers who were operating that day, their word was taken for gospel. So we've been campaigning for, we're on our 50th year for seeking truth and accountability. On the 23rd of December 2016, the then Attorney General John Larkin had granted us a new inquest, which has since been met with delays ever since. On June 2020, the Lord Chief Justice advised us that we are in year 2 of an inquest, so we're currently in process of waiting on that date. We officially relaunched our campaign in 2019, which has been on the up, trying to get public awareness. We had only heard in June 2020 that thankfully we were one step closer to the truth. Not even 2 weeks later, Brandon Lewis stood at this dispatch box and introduced this unconditional amnesty, driving a horse and cart through our human rights, shattering our hope and re-traumatizing every victim who has lost their loved ones through the conflict, shutting down all avenues of truth. what the British government is doing, the 3 Ds of death, delay, denial, is obviously no longer working for them. So they plan to propose a statute of limitations to cover up state murder and to cover up the deaths of 3 teenagers, which include a 13-year-old schoolgirl, a father of 6, and another parish priest. You cannot draw a line under people's grief and trauma. As Brandon Lewis says, time is not on our side. Well, time is on the British government's side. For our families, the Springhill West Rock Massacre, time isn't on our side. We're on our 50th year. Davy McCaffrey is 92. He's the oldest surviving relative. We need to have truth and accountability. This is no witch hunt. This isn't facetious claims. All we are is families looking for the truth of what happened to our loved ones. We cannot begin the healing process until we have our loved ones' names vindicated. And that's through an Article 2 compliant investigation. We will never give up fighting to ensure we have our inquest. We want our names cleared. We want an apology. We don't want revenge. All we want them to say, hold their hands up and apologise for what happened, because this just doesn't affect our families. This is affecting families across the political spectrum. You have soldiers' families, you have people who were killed from the paramilitaries, and you've also got anybody who was killed by the state. And everybody deserves the truth and justice, whether it be an investigation, whether it be an inquest, or whether it be prosecutions. But we're not after any prosecutions. We just want them. We want the truth. We want the facts of knowing what's happened, because you can't allow the truth to go untold. Regardless of how ugly the truth is, the truth needs to be told, because at the end of the day, there's a 13-year-old girl who was murdered talking to friends, a father of 6, another parish priest, which was killed 11 months from the same parish as Father Mullen in the Ballymurphy Massacre, and you've got 2 teenage boys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Alan Mcbride, please.
Hey, thanks, Brian, and hi, everybody. Okay, so I actually am not here representing a campaign in the way that other colleagues are, and I have to say I have a lot of respect for the way people have conducted themselves. I know John well, and you know, thank God that they got that message from David Cameron, but I know there are other issues, and I wish them well with that, and also to Natasha's case as well, and indeed to Michael's case. And with regards as well to the work that Margaret's doing. My case is my wife was murdered on the Shankill Road in Belfast in 1993. I think what happened that day is pretty well established. Unlike other colleagues, I did get some sense of justice. The person that carried the bomb into the shop, the one that survived, spent a period of time in prison and was released under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. Of course, there are other issues around the day that are less clear, and there was a story in the Irish News some years ago about the fact that the UDA got a tip-off from the police not to be there. I mean, we met with the Chief Constable and we've investigated that matter as far as we can, and I largely suspect that it was nonsense, the story. But irrespective of whether it was or it wasn't, I suppose the issue is that, you know, when you don't have the facts of a case established, then you do allow for people to speculate or to come up with all sorts of conspiracy theories, and these things themselves actually can do a lot to hurt and to harm families. I can remember the day, because I was a Human Rights Commissioner at the time, and I was at the office of the Human Rights Commission when my friend Gary Murray, whose sister Leanne was murdered on the Shankill bomb, phoned me to say that his mother Gina, who's in her 70s, was in bits because she had read this story or heard about this story in the Irish News, and wanted to know, could her daughter have been saved. That's why we then started to meet with the Chief Constable and with others to try and investigate if there was any truth in this story. And the story went nowhere. So as I say, I largely suspected that there was very little truth in it, but that's not to say that the hurt was already done. In the work that I do here in WAVE, I've been campaigning for more years than I care to remember. I may have been there right from the start. The very first Healing Through Remembering report back in 2002. We had the ELOS report, which I think was done in conjunction with the Pat Finucane Centre and Rebels for Justice. We had the Eames Bradley report. We had the House of Sullivan, Stormont House. We had all of these reports, and every one of them, whenever we go to the drawing board to sit and look at what can be done to help families to cope with the troubles, they all come up with a menu of options. So there's no one size fits all for this. And they're all remarkably similar in terms of identifying the issues and what needs to be done. But one thing is true, that every time we go back to the table, we come away with something sufficiently less than we had the time previous. So the time for discussing and debating and consulting is over. I think the last initiative, the Stormont House Agreement, has probably got to date the most widespread support for tackling these issues. It looks at truth recovery, it looks at storytelling, it looks at memorialization, it looks at all of these things. And I think we need to, let's not slip back any further. That said, I know that from our perspective, we're very much in favour of what works for victims, and many people will be very keen to tell you that there's very little that works for victims, and I think that's absolutely nonsense. We have worked here for a long number of years with victims, and we know what works. And at the minute, Canova seems to be working. I understand from people who are legally trained that it would need to be sufficiently upscaled in order to be able to perform a function for victims and survivors. But that's okay. I mean, if that's what it takes for them, why don't we do that? I mean, at the end of the day, Canova and the HIU are not dissimilar. So if it needs to be upscaled, I would do that. But the reason that we would make a case for Canova, I sit on their focus groups, so I know it reasonably well. And I also know because of the families that we work with, and that's the bottom line for me. When we're talking about these cases, if it works for families, it works. That's the important thing, and we know there's evidence out there. Alison Kilpatrick's report, and there's other evidence as well as to support the view that Canova works for families. And why does it work? It works for families because they have access to information that these families never had access to before. And sometimes that information, by the way, is not earth-shattering. Sometimes it can be something very simple, but it was never uncovered before in previous investigations that went on. But John Boucher and his team of detectives have uncovered it. The way they work with families, the fact that they sit down with families, they all have a caseworker. Those caseworkers don't move on to other jobs. It goes at the family's pace. The families are informed at every turn about the case and how it's progressing, and all of that just helps to build trust. And the fact as well that John Boucher has put in place, not just a victims focus group, which I sit on, but also an international steering group made up of international actors from right across the globe that he's accountable to make sure that there's accountability there, I think is absolutely fantastic. It is also Article 2 compliant. I was actually in a meeting very recently, in fact, just last week, with Brandon Lewis about some of these issues. And, we were raising the issues, as other colleagues have, about the fact that these latest government proposals are just not adequate. Promising an amnesty or anything that even looks like an amnesty is not acceptable to families. And he was at pains to point out that it's not an amnesty, and that he said that every case will have an Article 2 compliant investigation. And yet we know that they're wanting to take prosecutions off the table. Now, anybody that's worked with victims as long as I have will know that there's not a huge hope and expectation out there that there's going to be widespread prosecutions anyway. But if you're taking prosecution off the table, and I'm not a legal person, I don't understand this. I was a human rights commissioner for several years, but I'm still not certain. If prosecutions are off the table right from the off, can that investigation still be called Article 2? And if it can, I don't know how it can, because it seems to me that if you're taking one of the outcomes off the table right from the start, then how can it be Article 2? So some of these issues, I think, probably need to be discussed by people with greater intellect than certainly I have. But I do know that, and I'll finish with this, with regards to managing expectations. Most families don't expect to get their day in court and to have a prosecution. But if the only sense of justice that they have is that one day in the future, some of these either former British soldiers or indeed paramilitaries where they murdered our loved ones, that they will get that knock at the door. If that's the only thing that you have, you know, in terms of, you know, these people can't just go ahead and live their lives with absolutely no threat of this coming to court, or no threat of doing jail time, or no threat of these matters being investigated. If that's the only hope you have, why would you remove it for families? That's me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Alan. Thanks very much. We're going to go to, next to Margaret and then Michael, but go ahead there, Margaret.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today. I work with Justice for the Forgotten, which was founded in 1996, 26 years ago. Initially, in order to campaign for the victims of the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, which actually saw the greatest loss of life in the entire conflict. 34 people were killed in Dublin and Monaghan on the 17th of May 1974. But 11 of the last 26 years, Justice for the Forgotten has been part of the Pat Finucane Centre. Today, we have greatly expanded. We're really the only victims organisation, the only organisation supporting victims in the Republic. And we support nearly 60 families in total and over 200 individuals. And almost all of the families we support lost loved ones in either in cross-border bombings mainly, but also in cross-border shootings. And the vast majority of these attacks occurred in the early to mid-70s. So for the last number of years, we are losing a number of family members every year because obviously time is passing and everybody's getting older. And also many of our family members are old and infirm. Now, 6 of our cases are being investigated as part of the Glenanne Gang activities by John Boucher's team, and it's known as Operation Denton. So we have 6 cases being reviewed by him at the moment, and 5 of those 6 cases are also being investigated by the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland. And that has been ongoing for many years. We also have another case which was accepted 8 years ago by the Police Ombudsman's office, and we still don't have a date for its commencement. We have other cases as well that have really no avenue open to them at the moment. They were hoping, and we were hoping, that the Stormont House Agreement would be established, and even though we did have a bit of difficulty with the Stormont House Agreement because the Irish government didn't seem to have any intention of establishing a version of the HIU in this jurisdiction, but we would have lobbied, and we had been lobbying for that to be done. And just to say that we do a lot of research in the National Archives in Kew, identifying possibly relevant files. And you know, the proposals by the British government, they want to protect their veterans, and the Boris Johnson's government is coming under severe pressure from his right flank to establish, to grant this amnesty, etc. But we believe that there's more to it than that. We believe that they do not want a lot more truth to emerge. Some truth, quite an amount, has emerged of collusion, of dirty deeds. I think most people now recognize that it was a dirty war. And I think it's more important even for the British government to prevent more truth emerging. They want to wrap it all in the blanket of national security. And for example, if you go to look at the army log, the files of army logs for the 70s, they're almost all, without exception, closed for either 84 years or 100 years. So I think that is a very much on the minds of the British government in introducing an amnesty. Now, they say that they will set up some kind of truth recovery process, but at the moment we've no idea what that might be. It's in the command paper, it's all very, very vague. So we just don't know what it will be, and we're certainly very unhappy at the idea that Operation Denton could be closed down. The police ombudsman's investigation, if it's not complete by then, could be closed down. Also, the other avenue that we have, we're taking civil cases. The Dublin and Monaghan case is before the High Court in Belfast, but again, there are difficulties. We still don't know if it'll be accepted because of jurisdictional limits and time limits. So, you know, we have all these obstacles, but if obviously, if this amnesty, etc., is introduced and implemented, all of this will be closed down for all of the victims that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Thanks a lot. Again, there'll be time after this, I think, for us to get into some of these issues in a bit more detail too. But Michael, if you could introduce yourself and the campaign you've been working on, please, and then explain to people where this would leave you if this legislation comes in.
Okay, I haven't had a sound check. Am I coming across all right?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, very good.
Well, good afternoon to everybody. Most of you have known over the years and we've met, and it's a privilege to be part of this event this afternoon. As you've said, my name's Michael Gallagher. On the 15th of August 1998, our only son Aidan went into town to buy a pair of jeans with his friend, and Aidan never returned. His friend spent 3 weeks in hospital. In that bombing, it's always reported 29 people died, but we say 31 because one of the ladies was pregnant with twins. And also there was a number of Spanish visitors to the town, and 2 of those young people died, and one of them was being transferred to Belfast by ambulance, and that ambulance was in a collision and a taxi driver lost his life. So, you know, these things go on, but that wasn't my first experience. On the 3rd of June 1984, my youngest brother had been a member of the security forces, and he was assassinated by the Provisional IRA, even though he had left. He was in the UDR at that time. They had a policy of murdering Catholics regardless of whether they left or not. So the reality is that I am a victim of the Troubles, but I'm also a victim of the peace, because the peace agreement was signed in April 1998. But from a very early stage, we knew there was something very seriously wrong in the Omagh bomb. We knew that things weren't adding up. We later learned that there was quite a number of agents working on both sides of the border. And indeed, one of those agents, which was unique in the Troubles, was an American who was an FBI MI5 agent, jointly controlled, who passed back good quality intelligence. Get the crime and security in the Garda also had at least one source that was passing back intelligence and who was actively involved at that time. So there's a whole raft of issues around how intelligence was managed, and that's really been at the center of our campaign. Initially, in 2002, we took a civil action, and it was interesting to hear Margaret talk about the civil action, because our civil action started in Belfast, and during this period it moved for 3 weeks to Dublin. to take evidence from yard officers who cooperated very, very well, and we got a positive outcome from the point of view that we had a judgment against 4 of the 5 individuals who we named as being responsible in the Omagh bombing. But the end result was we were awarded something in the region of £1.5 million, but the families never received a single penny because of the jurisdictional issue. And a lot of these people disposed of their assets when they knew that they were being sued. But more recently, when the government took the decision to try and put a cap on the Troubles, people call it amnesty, you know, whatever name you want to call it, but what it meant was that people like me and the people that we're talking to this afternoon, we won't have any opportunity to ask any questions, to hold people to account. And I joined, Raymond McCord started this group, and I joined that because I believe that what we need is not just a single identity group going forward here. We need people from right across the community, regardless of what their background is. And I've taken the position is that it doesn't matter what the circumstances of the death was, the family have a right to know the truth, and where possible, a right to get prosecutions. And, you know, I think it's horrendous what this particular Conservative government's doing. They're wiping away 800 years. It's taken us 800 years to get to the civilized state where we don't go out and murder the people that murdered our loved ones. We agree to take them to court, but the government has made it, it's going to make it absolutely impossible for any of us to get any redress at all. And I think regardless of who those perpetrators are, whether they're people that were in paramilitaries, people that were in the military or the police, in fact, they are even worse, because what I would describe them as criminals in uniform, and they're the people that should be setting the standard, so they should be held accountable for their actions. And I mean, it's a terrible legacy that we do have here. And the issues, as far as Omagh is concerned, the issues are both with the British government and the Irish government. But what I often say to governments is, look, the embarrassment that you will go through will be nothing to what we have suffered over the past 23 years and the other victims, such as Bloody Sunday, who are now over 50 years. I think it's totally horrendous that there will be no accountability at the government if these processes go through. And I think when I talk to most victims, what they want is truth, justice, and dignity. And those are the things that we have not received. I think it's just, I don't know what to say about it, but how a government could wipe everything from history. And, you know, I'm listening to Margaret and others and talking about the long history they have going back, asking for answers. I think we really just have to hold those people to account. And I am engaged at the moment. I judicially reviewed the British government's decision not to have a public inquiry into the Omagh bombing. And we got that judgment on the 23rd of July last year, a very damning judgment on the government by one of only 2 High Court judges in Northern Ireland. The government today are still saying we're studying the judgment. So this is what they're doing. They're marking time. They know that time is not on our side, that the longer they can put this off. But I think it's important that we put our politics, our religion, or all of those things that make a huge difference to us in this country. For once, we need to park those, and we need to concentrate on clearing up the debris of the Troubles. And it's only the government, only the British government and the Irish government, because they control so many informed witnesses, so many informers, that they say that the paramilitaries don't have filing cabinets. You're quite right, they don't have filing cabinets. But the governments do have filing cabinets, and they have an awful lot of information in it. And I just feel that somebody has got to cleanse the cupboard. We've got to put this behind us and move forward. And the longer they keep doing this, the harder it will be. And I know that Alan has mentioned Operation Canova. Personally, I want to see the people in court that were responsible for the safety of my family in my town, and I want to ask them questions like, for example, we are a garrison town. There were 600 soldiers stationed in Omagh that day. They were informed there was a bomb threat, but they were told they were not needed. On every other occasion leading up to that, the military came out in support of the police. That's the reason they were there. 11 days before Omagh, there was a phone call to Omagh police station saying there was going to be a terrorist attack in Omagh on the 15th of August. That's exactly what we have. The district commander said he didn't know about it for 2 years after the event. So I'm not going to go into all the minutiae of the case, but there are so many unanswered questions. And, you know, I'm sure those other deaths, the families have many, many answers. For example, when I met the HET in relation to my brother's death, they gave us some information I knew was absolutely unbelievable and not true. And these two officers I had asked them how long they'd served in the police, and one was 29 years and one was 30 years. And I asked them, was this an effective investigation that was carried out into the death of my brother? And they said, what do you mean by an effective investigation? So, you know, sometimes we're taken for fools, and we just need answers, and we need to be treated with respect. Thank you very much, Al.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thanks to all of you for really powerful testimonies there. And I'm conscious that many of you have been struggling to find answers for many years. I mean, in the case of John, literally half a century now, and that, you know, you've been carrying this, some of you, for most of your lives. So I want to ask you all, really, but really starting with John. You know, this is clearly a long struggle. And if this legislation that we expect to be introduced, or something very like it happens in terms of an amnesty, to all of you, but starting with John, what will you do? Will this be the end of the road for you? Or what other alternatives do you see in terms of carrying on?
Well, we believe it's at the end. We will certainly continue on. Where we are now at the present time, if you think about it, we're in touching distance of getting at least some form of justice to the families and for the injured. And for that to be ripped away from us, that'd be heartbreaking. So our view on it now is we're waiting to see what the outcome of the High Court proceedings, what sort of report they decide on what's going to happen to Soldier Ref and to all the other soldiers. Where do we go? You know, we've never ever had a plan B. We always had a plan A, and that was to take it right to its full extent. We'll probably be sitting down if they do decide to implement this statute of limitations and find some way forward. And maybe a matter of and I don't know if we can do it or not, taking it to the European Court of Rights. You know, we just don't know. So our legal teams will certainly be involved in the future in relation to our next step. And hopefully, with the pressure of the people, like Michael, Alan, Margaret, and Cameron all said, this is about together, about keeping together, and it's one here. We can't let the British government get away with the denial of justice to our people. And we will find a way forward, and we will find a way of achieving our goals, and that is truth and justice for our people.
Thank you, and I invite any of the other speakers, really, if they want to comment on that, on whether or not, if this legislation is brought in and there is a statute of limitation, it will be the end of their campaigning, or not, and if not, then what will they do?
Well, I think it's Michael here, Brian. I think that if they are successful in bringing it in, it'll mean that we will spend more years in court, probably in Europe and in the UN, because I might be gone, but my daughter, you know, is motivated, and she will continue that fight. So we will be passing this on to the next generation, as some of us have already done. And I think that's an injustice in itself.
Could I add to that as well, Brian? I mean, I think from my experience, and I mean, I would have a lot of respect and have worked from time to time with the Ballymurphy families, and I think that's a case which, as I say, families that acted with huge amount of dignity in terms of bringing their case before Justice Keegan. So I do think, and even the fact that Natasha's on here is testament to the fact that, you know, I mean, I suspect that Natasha wasn't born 50 years ago. You certainly look remarkably young. So, you know, it is going to be the families, I think, that are going to carry on these fights, and I don't think families will just go away and give up. So, you know, what we need to do with the past is to sort it out, not to just kick it down the road or close it down. That might get a few British soldiers off the hook, and it might mean that the Tory government have fulfilled their commitments to their electorate. But with regards to families, I mean, it sends out a message that what happened to your loved one doesn't matter, that the person that murdered them, that they don't matter either, and that people can just come on and they can kill, you know, with absolute impunity. And I mean, if you could even challenge the British government in relation to more modern and more recent killings with Islamic terrorism, etc., are they saying that in another 30 or 40 years' time that all those cases would just be closed down and they would just go away and people would be expected just to put up with it and that's it? It's absolutely immoral, and I think we need to call it out from the very highest level.
Thanks very much. Margaret, could I just ask you if there are any avenues open to you in terms of pursuing any of these issues in your campaign through the Irish courts?
No, I don't believe there is with regard to the Irish courts. I suppose we are hopeful that by the time this legislation is implemented, that is, if it is going to be implemented, by the time it is implemented, we would hope that John Boucher in Operation Denton, for example, would be so far down the road that it couldn't possibly be stopped, that it should be nearly at an end, perhaps. And also the police ombudsman's investigation. Also, I imagine that we would be involved in taking judicial reviews, going to court if they did introduce this. I didn't lose a loved one like all the rest of you here. I represent victims, so and I have done since before Justice for the Forgotten was founded in '96. I've been working with victims since '93, in fact, but I wasn't affected myself by the conflict. But I know in the Pat Finucane Centre we have plans. We're already planning to have an international panel to look at all these issues, and also that in that process that the families' voices would be heard. So that is an avenue that we are planning for at the moment as well, so that if everything is closed down, we will have something to take forward for the families.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to come to Natasha last, just to ask a couple of things. One is if you have any comment on that idea of a transgenerational campaign, where, you know, a younger generation picks up and carries on that struggle for truth, even though those things happened before you were born. And the other thing is around, can you just explain a little more about the race against time that the families involved with you are up against in terms of trying to get on the docket and trying to get in that queue and a date set? Could you just say a minute or so around each of those things?
Yeah, well, I'm 31, so therefore I am the transgenerational element of our campaign. I have many more years of fight in me. Unfortunately, some of our campaign members don't. One being Davy McCaffrey, 92. He was even at the original inquest, so time currently isn't on his side. But me personally, I want this to end with my generation. I don't want my 2 sons having to carry on this fight. My mum, she doesn't want subsequent generations looking back in their family tree and finding out her father was an IRA terrorist and was shooting at the British Army. It was justified why he was killed. This is only, if this is introduced, this is only a start of another fight. We are so close to an inquest. We're in literally waiting on a date. So it could be within the next year or 2 of when we will actually get our inquest to have our loved ones vindicated and the truth being told. We won't give up. We have planned, if it does go ahead, we will be making application to the High Court. If that doesn't go ahead, then we'll go to the Supreme Court, and we plan to go all the way, because the British state, those who've made the law, they have broken the law by what they have done to our loved ones on the 9th of July in the Springhill Massacre. But now they're trying to rewrite the law, and the truth needs to be told, regardless of what the truth is or how bad the truth may seem. We've continued this campaign for 50 years. We just can't let it go just because the British government says your loved one no longer matters. You don't deserve to find out the truth of your loved one. We're talking about a 13-year-old schoolgirl. She had her whole life ahead of her. We're talking about 5 families, lifetime of memories lost through no fault of their own.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I say something about the generational aspect of it?
Go ahead, John, yeah.
If you don't mind. In relation to the Bloody Sunday families, all the mothers and fathers have now passed away. We lost the last widow there last year. So we are the 2nd generation, if you want to call it that. And we were hoping and praying that we could actually, within our generation, could find closure on the Bloody Sunday issue. Like I myself, I have 6 sons, and I know they're standing behind me, and we're ready to move and support, and they have always supported it over the years. But the fact is, as you know, the British government are hoping that everyone will die off, and that being the case, the problem is solved. But you must remember that the pride of the people who are left behind, will continue the fight until there's not a breath left in their body. So I'm hoping that we could finish what we set out to do within our generation. But as it stands at the moment, like for instance, we lost 6 family members within the last year. So there's lots of families, and I'm talking about 2nd generation families, 3rd generation families have now passed away. I've never seen the end of this campaign. But whilst we have everyone there still, we will continue on as best we can. But remember, in relation to the soldiers, the killers in Bloody Sunday, the 5 of them dead. And they're all in their 70s and 80s. I watched Wolford the other night there on TV, and he's walking around with his summer frame. He's now 88. And Jackson, he's in his 90s as far as I know. So there's going to come a time there will be nobody to prosecute. And that's for the essence of time. That's the importance of time. We have to force this issue as best we can before there's nobody left to prosecute.
Thanks very much, John. I think it's probably a good place to wind this up now, with the last word going to John because of the week that we're in. Thanks to all of those who spoke today, and also to any of you watching this evening. I'd remind you again that this is the first of in a 2-part production. The second will be Friday at 1 o'clock on January the 28th. Susan Mackay is going to be talking to former Lieutenant Colonel, now Reverend Nicholas Mercer, who was the lead legal British Army officer in Iraq. But we'll leave it there for now, and thank you all very much for joining us this evening, and thanks to all the speakers too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.